Welcome back to Close Up. We now want to bring in the incumbent, Congressman Chris Pappas, seeking his fourth term on Capitol Hill, representing the 1st District. Congressman, thanks for coming in.
Good to be with you, Adam.
So the voters know you now from the several campaigns, but if they rehire you for this job, what are you going to get done, in particular, if the Democrats have a majority in Congress?
Well, I'm going to be focused like a laser on what we can do to lower costs for Granite State families. I've been frustrated over the last 2 years. We've had extreme Republicans in control of the House of Representatives. They've put forward no workable solutions that are going to help people back here with respect to housing and child care and the other pressures people face in their day-to-day lives. So that's a top priority of mine. I'm working to pass an extension of the child tax credit to put more money back in the pockets of hardworking Granite State families. I'm working to expand federal programs that are going to invest in affordable housing in New Hampshire. We know we're going to be 60,000 units short by the end of the next decade of where we need to be to ensure that people can afford a place to rent and a home to buy. In addition to that, we're working to lower energy bills and to make child care more available and affordable. I was up in the Mount Washington Valley recently meeting with a provider. They can't hire the people they need, but they also can't turn around and charge families more right now. And so we need to be providing some direct support to providers that will assist our families, will encourage young families to locate in New Hampshire, and also help bolster our workforce. So beyond that, we've also got to be protecting people's personal freedoms. And this is a difference between myself and my opponent in this race. I support a woman's right to choose. We'll support the Women's Health Protection Act to restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land. He supports the Dobbs decision that took away a woman's right to choose and allows politicians at the federal and state level to bring forward abortion bans. And now we have a third of women in this country that are living in a state where abortion is essentially banned. 2 women in Georgia have lost their lives as a result of that state's ban. So this is about economic opportunity, lowering costs, it's about freedom, and ensuring that we have a Congress that's going to work together to deliver solutions. To me, this is about serving people. It's about getting things done. We've had enough of the partisanship in Washington and extremism, and I'm one of the most bipartisan members of the House. We'll continue to be that way because we know in New Hampshire that's how you get things across the finish line and ultimately make a difference.
More on your opponent in a bit, but you touched on child care there. How far should the federal government go? Because this is sort of a keystone issue. If people don't have kids because they just say, I can't afford to, both work and have the kid in child care, how far should that federal role go in being able to provide this service to people?
Well, this is a central issue to our economy. We know we have workforce challenges across the state of New Hampshire. That's hard hit in northern New Hampshire, where a lot of our child care providers have simply left the market since the pandemic era supports expired. So I think some direct help to providers is going to be really important to make their economic model viable and to help close the gaps in parts of this state. But I talk to families all the time, and you have to essentially get on a waiting list before you even know you're pregnant to have a shot at getting your kid into child care. There are a lot of great, compassionate individuals that want to pursue this profession, but we've got to make sure that they're rewarded for doing so, have good pay and benefits, and that we're capping out-of-pocket costs for families. I talked to one family recently that's paying more for their more for their child care than they are for their mortgage, and that's unsustainable for us economically. So direct support to families, capping out-of-pocket costs, as well as our providers, and this will help invite more people off the sidelines into the labor force and ensure that New Hampshire is a place where young families can make it.
You're up on the air torching your opponent, Russell Prescott, and it's a strategy in any race, defying your opponent. You served with him at the State House. Isn't it stretching the truth a little bit to portray him as an extremist?
Well, I think he's out of step on a number of issues. During his time in public office in New Hampshire, he devised a plan to cut the pensions of public employees, including our police officers and firefighters. And right now we have a recruitment and retention crisis in public safety in New Hampshire. He has been against a woman's right to choose throughout his career in politics in New Hampshire, was against marriage equality in New Hampshire, and even once New Hampshire passed that law, was running for state senate saying he was going to repeal it. That's just inconsistent with our values as Granite Staters. So I think he's been wrong on a number of issues, and this is about who shares the values of the people of New Hampshire and who understands how to actually get things done. I think I'll put my record of working across the aisle, delivering results against his any day of the week.
On the abortion issue, he said he will vote against any kind of federal law, and you contend this sort of makes him a zero and that, Republicans will be able to do what they want anyway. But his no vote could be consequential, though, if he's there in Congress.
Well, the fact is we've got an extreme Republican majority in the House that looks for every opportunity to put up more roadblocks for women to access care, including attaching an amendment to the defense bill, which traditionally has always been a bipartisan bill, to make it harder for women service members who are wearing the uniform of this country to access the abortion care that they need. So he will be a vote for that extreme majority. We've got to move in a different direction where we're protecting people's fundamental rights. That's why I'm the only candidate in this race who's pro-choice, just like the vast majority of Granite Staters are, and why I will fight to make sure that government gets out of the way of this decision. This is a decision that should rest with individuals in consultation with their doctors. That's not something Russell Prescott supports. It's something I support. It's why I'll get the Women's Health Protection Act passed that will restore Roe v. Wade.
Who can't obtain an abortion in New Hampshire who needs to be able to get one? Be specific.
Well, we have a third of women across the country that can't access the care that they need right now, and it's had disastrous implications for women in a number of different states. And we are just one Republican Congress and Republican president away from a national abortion ban being enacted into law. Project 2025 tells us that administratively, President Trump could ban abortion effectively by limiting access to medication abortion in this country. So this is incredibly dangerous. This has implications for people in all 50 states, including New Hampshire, and that's why we need a strong voice who's going to speak up for women's health. That's been my track record, and I'm the only candidate that will defend people's right to make their own choices.
We talked about your priorities in Congress. Of course, priorities cost money. Your opponent said he's going to cut spending. Where can you cut?
Well, we absolutely have to have greater fiscal discipline. We had a number of years during the pandemic where we came together as Republicans and Democrats to rescue our Main Street economy, to make sure that New Hampshire could continue to work and stay safe from the pandemic. And now is an important time to make sure that we're putting good ideas on the table about how we can cut the deficit. That's why I supported legislation 2 years ago that does that over 20 years by $1.9 trillion by negotiating lower prices for seniors on Medicare. We not only save seniors $1.5 billion, but we'll also save the Medicare program $6 billion annually in negotiated drug costs. So there are important ideas that we can put on the table. I'm sponsoring legislation that's recommended by the Government Accountability Office to fight these duplicative programs. You know, if you think of things like, licenses for programs for computers across the federal government, there's duplication that can save us millions of dollars just with a small idea like that. So we're looking for the president, as they submit their budget, to look at duplication, ending waste, fraud, and abuse. That's an important place we need to go. But as a member of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus, this is an issue we take seriously. And the first thing you have to do is admit that you have a problem. Republicans and Democrats created this problem over a period of decades. We've got to get back to a place where we are cutting the deficit and focusing on those core programs that serve the people of New Hampshire. I'm not going to cut people's retirement benefits. That's Russell Prescott's track record as a state senator. I'm going to look out for people while watching the bottom line.
You know, if former President Trump returns to office and wins in November, he's promised on day one to enact a very aggressive deportation program of undocumented migrants. What is your office going to do in response to that? Will you be actively monitoring that situation, responding? What happens?
Well, it's a hypothetical, but one we have to take seriously because Donald Trump is right in the thick of this campaign and could become the next president. I think it's important that we have rational, bipartisan policies with respect to the border. That's why I'm fighting to pass the bipartisan immigration legislation, toughest in a generation, that would shore up our border, invest in technology, invest in Border Patrol, and achieve some reforms to the asylum system. Those are important steps. Unfortunately, my opponent opposes that because Donald Trump opposes it. He wants to keep it out there as a political issue. So we should not be demonizing immigrants in this country. We have to recognize that we need order at our borders. I support that, have supported the hiring of 22,000 new border agents, new technology for the interdiction of fentanyl coming across our border checkpoints. But we also have to have reforms over the long term that serve our economy. I talk to business owners every day that are so hungry for workers right now. That's why we've worked to push the administration to allow more guest worker visas for H-2B and other critical programs that serve the needs of our seasonal businesses. Much more needs to be done to make sure that people are coming through legal channels, can work here, earn their American dream, and I think we can get that done in a bipartisan fashion if we're allowed to do it. I think Donald Trump will stand in the way and will create chaos. We need cooler heads to prevail here with respect to immigration because it's central to the safety of our country and the long-term security of our economy.
You're an ally of labor unions, but do you support what the longshoremen are doing right now, saying that they're not just striking, but potentially willing to cripple the economy to get what they want?
Well, this is a critical situation, and certainly the longshoremen deserve to be cut in on the deal here. These ocean shipping companies have been reaping record profits over the last several years since the pandemic. Some have seen an 800% increase in their profits. And so I think the longshoremen are asking for fair wages and working conditions and job security, and that's something that should be negotiated. So I urge the administration to try to get folks to the table. We need a resolution to this soon. I was talking to a business owner in New Hampshire yesterday that already has a few containers worth of goods that they're trying to get here to serve their business. They can't do it out of Newark because of the strike. This is only going to continue to get worse over time and have impacts on our economy. So it's really urgent that folks get to the table. I think workers have an important story to tell here. And I think they need to be rewarded for their hard work, especially over the last 5 years or so, when we've been focused on shoring up supply chains and making sure that we can meet Americans' needs.
So you stand with the dock workers on this one?
Well, I stand with them, and I think it's important that both parties come to the table and ensure that there's a negotiated settlement here. They deserve these raises, and I think the company should recognize that.
All right, Congressman Pappas, thanks for joining us. We'll see you out there on the campaign trail.
Thanks, Adam.
And we'll be right back with some news and notes. Stay with us.